What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 34. I am your host, Marcus, and in this episode, I have a special guest, Jay Alders. Now, he's a visual artist, an aspiring author, creative coach, and a podcaster. His art is internationally well known. He does do some fabulous work, but I wanted to bring him on the podcast to talk about igniting change in your life. I wanted him to come on, share his story, wanted him to give some inspiring words and show you that it takes a lot of hard work, dedication, and effort to achieve the dreams that you want. And he represents that very well, especially trying to be an artist. An artist is not an easy thing, especially to be able to get it to sell. So being said, I mean, he portrays that very well. And not only that, he's also a father to three beautiful kids. And, you know, he shares his story, I think, which is truly touching and allows you to see what it takes. Because it is not easy. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind closed doors. There's a lot of dedication that goes into it. There's a lot of grinding that goes into it to make the changes that you want. Change that you want does not come easy. And I'm glad Jay could come on to the show to go ahead and represent that and speak the truth to what he has seen in his life. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this episode started. Jason, welcome to the podcast. And I want to ask you, how are you doing today?
Well, hey, Marcus, I'm doing great. Thanks for welcoming me. I feel welcomed already. I'm doing good. It's really nice weather here in New Jersey where I am. And it's been already a productive and fun day. It's already, it's only 1 o'clock, so it's off to a good start. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Again, trying to deal with the hot weather, so trying to cool off, but definitely always productive day, trying to get a lot in. I know for yourself now, you're quite interesting. Now, I came across you through a site that matches people up for podcasts. So, and when you hit me up through email, there was actually quite intriguing the work that you do. And I know for myself, I tried to find people that, you know, have ignited change in their life. And you've definitely done that and what you've achieved in your life. And I wanted to bring you on the podcast to kind of share your story about essentially the origin story of who you are. Yeah. And can you kind of give us the origin, the rundown of who you are and where you've grown up?
Yeah, I like how you described how we met. It was sort of like a Tinder for podcasters, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And, got to say, it was a mutual thing. I was scoping around. I have as you know, I have a book coming out in a few months, and I was looking for people that were sort of like-minded. Really liked your story. I checked out your site. You know, I'm super amateur, you know, lifting weights and whatnot, but it is a passion of mine as well. So I saw you're into fitness and entrepreneurialism, and so there seemed to be a good fit to connect. So first of all, thank you for having me on. The origin story, I'll give you the elevator pitch version. So I am mostly known through my career as a visual artist. I have been an artist. I was like that weird art kid in school, right? So I was that kid that kind of was, you know, terrible at pretty much everything else. And thus I fell into my artistic curiosity kind of sucked me in. I was the kid that got pegged in the face with a dodgeball. I wasn't necessarily the biggest kid. I still am not, you know, the biggest guy in the world. And so my creativity has sort of been a form of both empowerment as well as sort of my invincibility cloak, if you will. It was sort of the thing that gave me stock in my life. I didn't have some other things going for me. So my creative talents and my curiosity and my ability to sort of express and pull things out of thin air and make something out of it became sort of my superpower. And so I went with that early on. My father, growing up, was an entrepreneur. He still is, and a salesman at that. So very, very type A, very workaholic. And I'm, you know, in the stereotypical sense, you know, he'd be more like the left brain, I'd be more the right brain, but it just so happens that I think I have both. And growing up, I had, tax deductions and marketing and branding infused in me, and how to file things and SKU numbers and all these different business things were like sort of a everyday conversation at dinner. And then I was the art kid. And my dad's best friend growing up was also a professional artist in New York City. He was an art director in a fancy art firm. So I also had sort of that uncle figure showing me that art could go places. It never seemed like an open-ended pursuit into nothingness. Like a lot of people think, why pursue art in any form? You're not going to do anything, get a real job, that kind of thing. But I had my father telling me that if I learned art and branding and business, I can morph those into something. And then I had sort of my uncle, family friend, Marshall, who showed me that you can make money and do things with art. And so from a very young age, I was the kid selling art on the corner instead of lemonade. I was making deals. I was trading things. I would trade a drawing for something else and eventually work my way up to like an electric guitar. I loved the hustle. I loved the creativity in both business and artwork. And, going fast forward, I ended up studying art in college, got a degree, started my first business around my first official LLC in age 17 or 18. And have been working for myself my entire life. I only had one sort of failed experiment at a real job. I was a webmaster designing websites in 1995, 96, when the web was still very new. It was a very infant stage. And so that lasted about 2 months. And then I realized I hadn't seen the sunset in about 2 months. And I was like, peace out. This corporate shit's not for me. I'm out of here. And other than that, I've always been hustling and making art and being creative and finding new ways to express myself and contribute. That's been a big thing for me, contribution, whether it's inspiration or whether it's visual forms of beauty. It's taken a lot of forms, but that's sort of what I've been doing. I've been lucky enough to be at this point in my career where my art's been on album covers, my art's been on magazine covers. I've had my art in like Barnes and Noble and major stores. I've been on stage with rock stars live painting. I've done a lot of crazy cool things with my career, and it's still going. I'm still finding new ways to branch out. So that's my pitch, Marcus.
That's phenomenal. I mean, you've had an amazing story. I do apologize if you do hear any noise in the background. But ultimately,
I just noticed we have like the coordinated V-neck plain T-shirts going on. That's a cool, and with beards. So we have like the cool like team outfit going on.
That is awesome. Now it's cool to see that you've come from an entrepreneurial realm. Like for me, like I've never had that, and it's neat to see that your father was in it. You had a uncle that was doing it as well, and then helped morph you, even though you still dipped your toes into the corporate life and
very briefly, yeah.
But that's awesome that you've essentially allowed yourself to develop this not have a desire or need to work for somebody else. So, and I've seen that through a lot of your stuff, going through a lot of your videos and stuff. But one thing I've noticed about like a lot of your paintings and your arts is you like the ocean, the beach theme. Now, where does that come from?
Well, God, a lot of people have asked me that. It's hard to kind of pinpoint. I guess I could say that it's come from a bunch of places. So growing up, my dad was a scuba diver up until he got older and had some health issues. So I grew up hearing about his adventures scuba diving, and that kind of love and fear of the ocean was always very intriguing to me. And I was scared, really, to tell you the truth. I was scared about doing scuba diving, and it was fear of mine. And it wasn't until after my father stopped scuba diving that I had an opportunity to kind of face my fear, and I'm now open water certified and love it. So just being exposed to the ocean and hearing stories from my father was sort of the beginning phase. And then going to the ocean at the Jersey Shore with my parents growing up was always really special because as a child, I would hear stories from my father. And when you're a kid, you think your parents know everything. So I would ask my dad about different kind of fish and how do these waves occur and where do the currents come from? And it was just very intriguing. The whole idea of a world being under the world that we see, that sort of metaphysical, spiritual aspect was really, really intriguing to me. And I remember at a young age being very enamored by that. And then as I got my, and also I should add as a preface, I grew up skateboarding. It was my huge passion for me. So then fast forward to I'm 16 or 17, I learned how to snowboard, and then I get my driver's license. And now all of a sudden the 15-minute drive to the beach was no longer predicated on my parents taking me. I can now go whenever I wanted. And so then I was able to finally get mobile, get to the beach, and then transfer my love of snowboarding and skateboarding into surfing. And then the whole idea of beach culture and surf culture, and being a teenager and having chicks in bikinis that I was friends with running around was like extra awesome bonus. So like just the culture and the idea of the aesthetics to it, the light bouncing off of the water, and the smell of the ocean air, and like just literally every sense of mine was affected by the ocean and nature in general. The aesthetics, the touch, the smell, the feeling, the hormones, the adrenaline, all of it was kind of hardwired, going to the beach, the whole tradition and ritual of it, everything about it I loved. So I think that's where I was born.
I love that. And something I always talk about too is I always talk about how, connecting with nature and stuff, especially when, a lot of people going through or trying to achieve things like you're talking about, right? Like trying to take that break. And it's nice that you kind of have that, right? Like that is like your getaway essentially to help you. Do you find that helps you how to create that creativity and stuff when you go into creating these paintings and anything like that, is escaping and getting out?
Yeah, I think painting or playing guitar or any sort of expression where there's not necessarily a finish line or a metric to compare yourself to, I think that's a form of meditation. And I think that they all kind of tie in. So, going out to the ocean or being in the lineup or going surfing, that has one set of emotions and feelings and spiritual energy to it. And then creating art kind of has very similar cohesion. There's a level of meditation, there's a level of creation to it. And so putting those, they seem to me, they go very much hand in hand. The idea of like being one with the elements of nature to me is very similar with being one with my set of paints. Like the idea of understanding how light works and being out there surfing and seeing how the water and the reflections and the ambient light has an impact on every object around it, and how the reflections can dissipate and you can see through the water. There's an opacity as well as transparency to water, and that I feel like we have that as well. There's a transparency and opacity to us, and I love taking that to the easel, and then vice versa. I love creating a painting and then going out in nature and then finding solutions in nature. I might be working on a painting and not knowing the exact color combination that I need, and then I'll go out in nature and poof, there it is right in front of me. So they're kind of tied together, if that makes any sense. So it's very it's mystical almost.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I can see where you can make that correlation. I know even like for myself, like I love art and I still do some art. Obviously nowhere near what you are, but I do enjoy art, and I know how it does have that meditative state. And I like how when you have that eye, it's almost like you put that essentially that perspective on everything in life, right? And I think
I think there's a bleed over effect for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, it's actually quite interesting. So, when you were going back to growing up and stuff, do you ever found like or find that was hard to find motivation and stuff to go out on your own, or do you feel like you were kind of pushed or pressured into doing that?
To go on my own as far as making a living from it? Is that what you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, to
Yeah.
to ignite the change that you want in your life, and even though you had seen some of the corporate life.
Yeah, I didn't really see much of corporate life. It was a glimpse. I jumped in. I'm like, F no, hell no. Am I allowed to curse on this? No.
Yeah, you can curse.
I jumped in and I was like, fuck that. I'm out of here. This is not for me, man. But no, to be honest, like it wasn't for me. It wasn't like a bold step to go out on my own. To me, it was the exact opposite. Like the idea of working for someone else, the idea of tying my schedule to someone else, like that took I don't know, courage is more the word. That took more like commitment. That took more boldness. That was more crazy, in my opinion. That was more risky. In my head, there's much more risk, much more pain, much more suffering involved in the idea of working for someone else, having my schedule dictated by someone else, the idea of having to do the same thing in the same place every day. Like, that wasn't even an option for me. That was like, hell no, that wasn't an option. For me, it was more about like, how can I create? It was very much the mindset of being an artist. You go in front of an easel and you go in front of a canvas, you're like, what can I do? How can I do it better? How can I do it differently tomorrow? And like, that exact creative mindset is what I've done with the business side. And like, I've tried many, many, many things, many which have failed. So I don't want to paint a picture of any falsity that someone might think, oh, lucky for you, dude, you did it and it worked. No, I've started businesses and lost them. I started a skateboard company, lost tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. I started a gallery that failed. I started a web design company. I've done many things, not all of which have worked, but they've all been different carnations, just like a new painting. Each painting, you do your best. Sometimes you fall flat on your face. And I heard this quote in Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Have you ever read that?
Yeah, I have read that. Yeah.
Great book. I mean, I read that, like, I guess already I'm going to date myself, but it's been decades ago when I first read it. And he talked about the idea that 9 out of 10 businesses fail, and that only a certain percentage of people see that as a good thing. And to me, I look at it, I take that advice, and it means that, okay, so all I have to do is start 10 businesses and one of them will work. It just statistically made sense to me, as opposed to most people will see that, or see entrepreneurs they know and say, oh man, they tried these 3 or 4 or 5 things and they always keep failing. To me, and probably to you, you see that as like, all right, cool, I'm getting closer to the one that's going to work. So it didn't really take courage per se. It just took a lot of like work, a lot of hard work, a lot of smart work, a lot of adapting and pivoting.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, it's just getting over that whole thought and idea that it's a failure, right? I think is ultimately what it is. And I know there's a lot of people, even like for myself, like I come from that corporate world. Like I grew up in that. I didn't have the uncles or father that was an entrepreneur. So like for me, that's all I knew. And so like branching out, it was very different, very weird, realizing I was 100% reliable on myself. Is there any kind of advice you would give to somebody like that who's thinking about possibly doing that, or coming from that corporate life into wanting to do like entrepreneur? I know you talked about it's going to be a grind, right? Like it's a numbers game, right? You think like someone should slowly branch out, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, even though I'm going to be a hypocrite here, because this is not the advice that I took, I wouldn't encourage most people to just stop what they're doing and jump into something unless there's a certain set of circumstances. Like when I decided to literally drop my business that I had been working on for 15 years, I had a mortgage, I had all the grown-up bills, but I didn't have children at the time. And it was a risk I was willing to take because the idea of regret seemed monumental to me. And the idea of not doing what I actually wanted to do. I was getting to the age at that time when I was like, do shit or get off the pot. You can't just keep making excuses. And so if someone's listening and they're a mom or a dad, or they have bills that are just, they don't have enough emergency savings to keep them floated for a year or so, don't just quit your job. But if you're someone that's young enough, you don't have children, or your bills are so crazy low, and you're living with your 5 roommates or something, and you have that situation, it might be a good thing to just kind of rip the Band-Aid off and jump and kind of knit your parachute on the way down. There is something to be said about having that motivation of having like your fire on it, or having your ass on fire and having to like run fast enough. There's something to be said about both the ways of doing it. But again, a lot of it comes down to paradigm. Like for you, you said you kind of grew up and got pushed into corporate life, and escaping that seemed scary. For me, that was the opposite. The idea of doing something like that was terrifying. And I'm not being like, I'm not understating that. That literally was terrifying. Like the idea of being stuck in an office, and it's probably the same amount of fear that maybe someone like you might have had to be on your own. So it's just what you're comfortable with and what you know is, and the idea is just be comfortable, not being comfortable. That's the best advice.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's really well put, right? Because you always think the grass is greener on the other side, and then getting that perspective, right? Because you've been essentially an entrepreneur your whole life. And so seeing that coming from both sides, you always think, is it better? Is it going to be harder? And I think but the point in my life, I'm the same way, right? Like I'm at that point where it's like either shit or get off the pot, right? Like I don't want to live with no regrets and not attempt to do something, right? And so, and having that and going out and having those adult bills and all those things, those responsibilities, but ultimately understanding that, you know, it's also the time, right? Like you don't know when your time will come, but you want to leave it all on the table, right?
Yeah, you know what? And it's important to note that people like myself, people like you, people that are out in the public, in air quotes, we're putting out there like our best stuff. We're putting out, for the most part, we're putting out the accolades and the cool things. Oh, here I am backstage on this concert, or here I am doing this fancy thing. You're not seeing like the grind. Like you're not seeing me sitting here and doing bookkeeping, or like dealing with my website crashing and having to like, stitch together PHP, or like do things that are super not sexy at all. And, you're not seeing like spending like an entire weekend reading a book that's like 20 pounds on how to like do this or how to do that, or how to video edit, or how to do something else. Like there's so many things that people are not seeing, and people that are in the 9-to-5 culture, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's been times when I still, recently would think, God, if I only had a 9-to-5 job, that would be such a relief. It would feel like a fucking vacation to have like a 9-to-5 job, I think sometimes, because when you're working for yourself, you're always on, you're always thinking about work. You're always trying to advance yourself, your abilities, you get to the next plateau. It's hard to just celebrate the victories, and it's hard to just turn it off. And there's times when I think, God, a 9-to-5 would be great. You come home, you don't think about work ever again. You're done. You can go do your thing. Like, I don't want that, but there's moments where you feel like that would be so nice to just work 40 hours a week,
Yeah, most definitely. I see that, and like making that transition, like it's always like I gotta be on, like you're saying. I've always been motivated to want to go out and do things for myself. And I find like, being in that corporate environment, like I try to take things on all by myself anyway, and do all those things. And I think it kind of helped with like coming from the military, right? Like you have more than just one job. And I think as an entrepreneur, you see that a lot. Like you're saying, like you'll be up late reading a book, trying to understand how to edit or do any kind of other different things with audio, podcasting, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a grind. But like you said, it's
not for everyone.
You want to know, right? Yeah,
it's not for everyone. I'm a big believer of like how bees are set up. You have like the drone bees, the worker bee, the queen bee, and all of them from birth are set to do a certain thing. Like the drone bee can't take over the queen bee's job, and the honey bees are doing a certain thing. Like, and some people are meant to be in a cubicle, and they're very happy doing that, and that's freaking awesome, because we need people to do that. And there's people that love doing what the stuff that we do, where you're figuring it out. And there needs to be that sort of balance in the world where there's people that are doing the super nerdy stuff, the super laborious stuff. Like there is no, equal level where everyone does the same thing and the same amount of effort and the same whatever. Like I'm a big believer in meritocracy. Everyone does what they do, and they're responsible for their successes and failures.
100%. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, as far as like, you're a creativity coach, correct?
Yeah, that's one of the hats I wear, is a creativity coach. I one of the many hats. So it's funny. So during my book writing process, I was talking to a friend of mine, happens to be an old roommate of mine, who's a best-selling author of like 72 books, I think it is. And I was talking about the process and how stressful it is. And he was like, "Why don't you get a book coach?" I'm like, "What the hell is a book coach?" And so I ended up connecting with the book coach, Azul, who does it professionally, and I've seen the benefit of working with people. And in doing so, I often seem to have, I should say, people messaging me, or go to an event or an art show. Artists are asking questions, understandably, because that's a great way to learn. And so I always have found great pleasure and fulfillment in being that person for people that I really didn't have. I never had an artist to work hands, to model exactly what I wanted to do, aside from my art director uncle friend who I saw like once a year. So the idea of being able to help other artists has always been really important to me. Creative people feel purpose driven, but it's like we're often driven by something greater, but we don't know where we're going. And so I decided to kind of put it out there. Hey, I'm available, if anyone needs some help. And that sort of gained momentum. And then I sort of put into more of a formal offering on my website for people to work with me in that respect. So I currently work with like authors and musicians, lots of artists, people trying to figure out what they're doing, more often than not, why they want to be doing that, how kind of answering the questions and having someone on the same side of the desk with them to kind of work and figure it out. Because when you're that close to your work, whatever it is, entrepreneurialism, art, music, writing a book, whatever it is, when you're that close, you can't see the stuff that's super obvious, and you don't know how to see the potential or the opportunity. And so, yes, that's one thing I really find a lot of pleasure in that I've been doing for a good number of years now.
And I think creativity and is something that can really benefit a lot of people, right? I think are trying to be a little bit more not just a creative, but being exploratory on different things, right? And looking for new thoughts and ideas and perspectives can really help them, right? Just determine like essentially their path and where they want to go, right?
Yeah, I think there's a stigma around creativity as being like the people, running through poppy fields with like, funny looking outfits on and pink hair. And like, yeah, there's definitely some truth to that. But for me, I've always seen the cohesion of creativity in business, as well as my own art practice, in my parenting, in everything that I do. Literally, I can't think of a career, I can't think of a product or service that doesn't massively benefit from someone or a team of people that are creative. And I feel like as our society advances towards like automation and algorithms and other types of things, I think creativity is one of a hand full of professions or trades or pursuits that really is unique to humans as opposed to an algorithm. Yes, there are algorithms that can create a song. There are algorithms that can actually generate AI painting. But the idea of creating something like a real person can do and coming up with ideas that are that abstract, I feel like is very unique to us. And I think anyone, whether you're working in finance or whether you are, a CEO, or whether you are just someone that sits at a desk, creativity has a huge impact in every business and every pursuit. And I think that by making time for playing the drums or making time for journaling or any number of other types of expressions, that sort of habit and that sort of discipline, it does have a bleed over effect into other parts of your life. When you're putting yourself in problem solving mode and you're trying to put the pieces together, it's very much left right brain connection. It's not just like, ooh, la 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 la. It's not just painting, a bunch of stuff for no reason. There's a pragmatic benefit and a consequence to practicing creativity.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's beneficial for everybody to do that. You find that journaling or essentially painting or whatever that allows you to foster more creativity. How would you go about degenerating, being more creative, right? If someone wanted to foster their creativity, how would you go about telling them how to take those steps to do that?
I think it's really important to prioritize it in the same way that as grown-ass men, you have to prioritize sleep. You have to prioritize eating well. You have to prioritize spending time with loved ones. There's the certain things that should get a little bump up in your list of things to do. And more often than not, if you're not a practicing creative person, usually that ends up on the bottom of the list. And what happens is that has like a trickle up effect where it's like, if you're not making time to play electric guitar like you did when you're in high school, if you're not making time to write, if you're not making time to make cookies just for the fuck of it, if you're not making time to do things like that just for no purpose, you're really missing out on like the quieting of the mind, the meditative aspects. Also, the problem solving part of it, you're missing out on. Like, how do you piece things together from thin air? How do you fix problems in a way that you didn't see? Like, everything cannot be boiled down to just theory and academia and other types of formula driven ways of doing it. So how do you do it? So for me, Number one, if you feel inspired, even if you're just in the shower or driving home, if you feel inspired, don't ignore it. Like if you're driving home and you're stressed out and you see the sunset and there's something about it that's making you look at it, like think about that and really pay attention. What is it? Like when I first met my now wife, I would take her to the museum. She would I think she was trying to impress me that she liked art, and she would look at a painting. Oh, I like that. And walk by. I'm like, no, get back here. What do you like about it? Tell me what you like about the painting. And I would make her, I used to make her, now she's used to me being annoying, but she would say, oh, I like the colors. Well, what do you like about the colors? What do you like about how they interact? How does it make you feel? It's like it's like doing yoga where you connect the physical movements with the breathing, the mind-body connection. I think practicing creativity helps that as well. What makes you do a certain thing that's creative is because it makes you feel a certain way. It makes you connect to a certain part of your thought process. So if you feel inspiration, don't ignore it. But also, as we get older, generally we don't feel inspiration because we're stressed out. We're going to work, we're commuting, we're tired. So the way to do it is prioritize it the same way you would exercise. You're not going to, most people are not going to ignore exercise. They prioritize it even if they freaking hate it, because you know there's a consequence. If I don't work out, I'm going to look flabby. If I don't work out, I'm going to be tired. My hormones are going to drop. My arms are going to wiggle around. Like there's reasons we do things. There's a consequence. And I think it's important to make time, even if it's 10 minutes, to help, people that are too busy, 5 minutes a day for the next 2 weeks, do something creative. I don't care if you pick up your guitar that you haven't touched since 8th grade. I don't care if it's doodling while you're on the phone with your boss. Make 5 minutes a day a priority to be creative in any way, shape, or form. When that 5 minutes is done, if you're not into it, put it down and do that for 2 weeks. And if you don't feel a quantitative change or notice something different going on in your brain, then maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. So I think prioritizing it, even if it's little tiny increments, it has a tendency to kind of like grow. It's like when you're working out, I know you're into fitness. People will say, well, do one sit-up, do one push-up. No one's actually going to stop there, right? It's just making the time. It's making the time, making it important, and realizing that it has a consequence in your life.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It's just putting in the repetitions to bring that essentially to the forefront of your mind, right? And as long as it's there, I think you can really grow and foster that a lot more. And I think that goes for anything, right? Not just creativity, but anything you're trying to really work on, especially if you start talking about like managing problems, dealing with problems on a daily basis, right? If you kind of work that repetition, you can combat problems a lot easier and have different ways of handling the different issues that you go through. Now, as far as, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I feel like by doing those sorts of things, you make yourself more interesting. And I think that in itself has a benefit. As we get, it's like when you were younger, when you were like in high school or in college or in your 20s and you go to a bar, or even like, let's say when you're first starting to drink, what's your conversation about? Yo, bro, what's going on? What are you doing tomorrow? Oh, cool. I'm doing this fun thing. I'm going to play this game. I'm going to this bar. I'm going to meet this chick. I'm going to this party. Like, it's all about fun shit, right? I bought this car. I'm doing this cool thing. And then you get older and it's like, so Marcus, what do you do for a living? Oh, interesting. What's your investments like? And we all become so freaking boring, right? So like, it sucks because that's a consequence of not prioritizing creativity. And I feel like by doing these little things, right? Like if everyone listening spent 5 minutes today doing something cool, if nothing else, at the end of the week, you'd spend 30 minutes doing something conversational. So if I meet Joe Schmo on the street tomorrow, oh, Jay, I heard you on Marcus's podcast. I did that thing. I've been playing guitar. I learned how to play this song. Guess what? The next time you go out to a bar or you go to hang out with your friends at dinner or you're at a business luncheon and you have a conversation, you're going to be the guy that's like, oh, I'm learning how to play Let It Be on the guitar. Or like, oh, I'm a writer. Like you obtain a part of your identity that's been lost and you become interesting again. You have something else in your life worthy of thinking about besides like numbers and nonsense and bills, right?
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately, that's what life's about, right? It's not just getting caught up, especially like coming from that entrepreneurial realm. Like you want to still have fun, right? You still want to live your life. So I like having that piece of creativity every day, and having something worth talking about is definitely important. But
having something to think about, having something to relate to people, and having something else that's cool in your head. Like we all obsess, our mind repeats all day long. And it's like, it's cool if you can like have that going and like with something else, like play a different song. Like instead of thinking about this pile of bills that's next to me right now, I might be thinking about the painting that's behind me, or like I'm looking at my amp over here. I'm like, shit, I want to like work on that song again. And your mind's the back burner shit that's going on in the back of your head can be cool. Like change the music, change the soundtrack, right?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I love that. I love the way you put that. Something I gotta foster more is my creativity, and I think it's sometimes too. It's doing something that's different, right? I think a lot of times you get so routine in something that may, I think, bring out creativity normally. I think it's good to add like that random different piece of creativity. Like you said, like go and pulling the guitar out you haven't played in 5 years or whatever the case is, just to just kind of touch on some stuff that you haven't touched on a long time, right? And open up that new avenue, I think, of thought process, I think really helps.
I think you're right. I think it is really important to do that. Yeah.
But now as far as like, have you ever had like any bad advice? Like what is the worst advice you've ever received apart from like your entrepreneurial journeys and stuff? Now, yeah, I know you've had like multiple businesses and stuff. Is there any bad advice you've received along the way?
Bad advice. It's a great question. I'm trying to think if something jumps out at me. I don't know if it's bad advice per se, but I feel like although going to college was a super fun experience, I definitely don't think that college, especially nowadays, is needed for most people anymore. So while I had an amazing experience, being advised to go to college, I don't think is for everyone. I think that's one of them. I think bad advice that I didn't necessarily get, but most people get, is like you have to work 9 to 5 corporate type job in order to make a living or in order to be happy. That's not a great one. Maybe not necessarily bad advice, but I think that in that category, as I'm thinking about it, although unrelated to your question, I think listening to your gut is really important. Like the things that I've done that were mistakes were often related to ignoring my gut, my intuition. Also, a lot of the things that I have done that have flopped, I sort of did. A lot of these things were like, they were, how do I word this? They were sort of generic versions of what I actually wanted. Let me give you an example. So like I've always loved skateboarding. And in like maybe 1999-ish, 98, somewhere around that time, I started a skateboard company. I thought that would be really cool. But in addition to thinking it was really going to be cool, which it was, the idea was maybe if I got my art on skateboards, that I would be noticed for my art, and then I could be a painter. I have that kind of story in a lot of different forms. That's one form. I have many versions of that where it's like, maybe I can do such and such. I can make such and such money or get such and such exposure, and then I could be a painter. And so the idea of not just going for it has kind of taken me a long time to really fully understand. As soon as I told myself, well, just skip to the end and just be a painter, as soon as I kind of admitted that to myself and tried it and actually went for it like full force, guess what? I was a fucking painter the next day, right? But it took many iterations that I failed at take this like weird back end route. And I think a lot of people have that. They like have this thing where it's like, maybe I'll take this corporate job because I'll get exposure and I'll make enough money, and then I'll do this thing, whatever that thing is, right? And I feel like sometimes we take a path that seems really odd and peculiar, like starting a skateboard company, for instance, seems like an odd way, but in my head, it seemed to be a more logical path. And I think we do that a lot as humans. We take this thing, this weird path that seems more logical to achieve something that has nothing to do with what we're actually doing. And we lose sight of the actual end game. Like, what's the end game of your corporate job, whoever's listening? Is it to just make money? Is it to just have security? Well, okay, why do you want money and security? Well, probably to feel good so you can have more time and money to take vacations and do fun stuff, spend more time, to have more free time, to have more freedom, whatever it is. Well, guess what? You could actually skip past that in some cases and just start taking more vacations. Or you can move to somewhere that's more vacation-like. Or you can do any number of other things that get to that finish line without taking this weird torturous path that a lot of people are taking. That was a weird roundabout way to answer your question, but that's just some stuff that kind of tangentially popped in my head.
No, that's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I totally believe in that, like following your intuition, right? I think that's a big thing. A big thing I've tried to do, especially as I get older, and realize that it is not all logical, right? It's definitely following that, and not just the bad, right? Like I think you have to follow your intuition for the good as well, right? And that allows you and opens up a lot of different opportunities, I think, in people's lives. And I think, like you're saying, is just realizing that it's okay, right, of the uncertainty. I think a lot of times we get worried about the uncertainty, so we don't do things just because logically it just doesn't make sense, right? But
yeah, what you touched upon is interesting. I wrote about that in a chapter of a book where it's like it's important to kind of differentiate and understand and be familiar with like that negative impulse voice in your head as opposed to the voice of like inspiration. Because if you don't pay attention, and if you're not aware enough and you're not in tune enough with your thoughts and your being, it can sound really, really similar, man. You know what I'm saying? Like that voice, that voice that's like, Marcus, you could fucking do this, bro. Like that voice is the same as like the voice that's like, yeah, jump off the cliff. It's a great idea. like that. That's that. There's like that similar, you know, like devil and like angel on your shoulder. They're kind of both whispering in your ear, and it's important to understand how to differentiate like the impulse versus the intuition. They're they're like on that walkie-talkie frequency in our head that are like they can very much be confused if you're not aware enough.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You definitely have to, again, repetition, right? Try to practice understanding the difference between the two. But most definitely, what I'd like to kind of close this out with is, what kind of message would you like to leave people that are going to listen to this podcast?
Well, based on what you're doing and your mission, from what I know of it, I believe that you are focused on helping people to make drastic change. I believe from following you and looking at some of your work, that's a big part. So in order to bolster that really important message and mission that you're on, I would say that it's really important to honor your different sides, right? So instead of just saying I'm this business guy or I'm this fitness guy or I'm this whatever girl, it's important to honor all parts, right? Like the very creative side of you that maybe likes to freaking crochet and watch Netflix. That's important to honor. It's also important to honor learning about, invoicing and marketing and accounting. It's also important to honor all different parts of your life. And I feel like that balance of both your life and your schedule and your money and budgeting and allocation of resources and energy, I feel like those are really important, as well as understanding your ultimate intentions and your mission. I feel like we all need a purpose. We all need a mission. It's not just about like, I'm going to wake up and do this routine, because eventually routines kind of fizzle if you forget the ignited force within you, right? The part of you that's lit on fire. You need that to understand, like, why am I drinking this shake every morning? Why am I doing these habits? After a while, if you forget the feeling that's associated with it, it's going to kind of fizzle out. So I would say get really in tune and try to find that balance. And it's going to take a lot of work and energy and not always be very fun. Like, it's not very fun to have to work out all the time. It's also not fun to be constantly learning new techniques and skills as an entrepreneur or as an artist or a craftsman or whatever your trade might be. So drilling in on mission and your end game, I think, is really important. Like Stephen Covey talked about, like, begin with the end in mind is a really big one that I try to focus on. I guess if I'm giving like last words, I would like to give a plug that within the next few months, I don't know the exact date, but we're now in July, and I'm thinking by November-ish, I hopefully will have my book out, which is going to be called Untangling Creativity: The Artist's Pursuit of Purpose, Prosperity, and Soul. And it's going to be about a lot of the stuff we have talked about, where, you know, we're trying to make sense of our creative sides. We're trying to prioritize our creative expression and find, you know, purpose and find success and kind of have it as a part of your spiritual life. So I guess that's what I would end with, I suppose.
I love that. And hopefully by then we can get you back on the show and
Would love it.
push your book out some more. So that'd be awesome. It sounds great.
Thanks, Marcus.
But Jason, I really appreciate you coming on, taking time out of your busy day. And thank you guys out there for listening. Again, I will leave all of Jason's information down in the description below for those people that are on YouTube. And also, I'll leave his information on the podcast as well. Again, thank you, Jason. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I will see you guys later.
Thank you, Marcus.